Chapter 25 of J.S. Bach, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. J.S. Bach, Volume 2 by Albert Schweitzer, translated by Ernest Newman. The Leipzig Cantatas of 1723 and 1724. According to the necrology, Bach wrote 5 complete yearly series of church cantatas. In Leipzig, this kind of church music was performed on 59 Sundays and feast days, so that Bach must have written 295 cantatas. 190 of these have survived. Of these, about 165 belong to the Leipzig period. Bach was cantor at St. Thomas's for 27 years. This gives 6 cantatas per annum. Not a large figure when we think, for example, of the productivity of a Telemann. The works, however, were spread unequally over all these years. In the later Leipzig period, Bach did not write much church music, so that in the earlier years he must sometimes have written as many as 20 cantatas per annum. The first cantata of his to be performed in Leipzig is thus referred to in Johann Sebastian Riemer's Jahrbuch. On the 7th February, Dominus est Domici, Herr Sebastian Bach, Kapellmeister in Köthen, underwent his probation for the post of cantor, rendered vacant by the death of Herr Kuhnau. The title of the cantata is not given. It was Jesus nahm zu sich die Zwölfe, number 22. The unknown poet has taken from the Gospel for this last Sunday before the Passion, Luke 18, verses 31 through 43, only the first and fourth verses. Christ's announcement to the disciples of his coming passion. He unfortunately passes over the expressive series of pictures in the second and third verses. Following tradition, the bass gives out the words of Jesus in an arioso. The orchestra, strings and oboes, adds a symphonic accompaniment that is wonderfully expressive of the sorrow of Jesus and his inner firmness. The whole movement has a somewhat march-like character. The succeeding chorus, Sie aber vernahmen der Keines, reproduces very effectively the mutual questionings of the disciples. The charming, syncopated theme of the aria, Mein Jesu, ziehe mich nach dir, Jesus, draw me near to thee, paints the picture suggested in the words. The aria, Mein alles in allem, mein ewiges Gut, my all in all, my endless treasure, which is based on the joy motive, is overpowering in the energy of its flight. The final chorale has a ravishing orchestral accompaniment. We do not know whether this cantata pleased the Leipzigers or not. It sounds enchantingly throughout. Spitta thinks that Bach laid it out so simply in order not to depart too far from the style of Kuhnau. On the 30th May, 1723, the first Sunday after Trinity, the new cantor introduced himself to the Leipzigers with the cantata Die Elenden sollen essen, number 75. We learn from the Acta Lipsiensium Academica that it was received with good applausu. It is in 2 parts, but is otherwise as simply constructed as the probation cantata. The first chorus, as in Nun komm der Heiden Heiland, number 61, is cast in the French overture form. The stately Grave section comprises the words Die Elenden sollen essen, dass sie satt werden, und die nach dem Herrn fragen, werden ihn preisen, and the Allegro the words Euer Herz soll ewiglich leben. Here again the chorale, Was Gott tut, das ist wohl getan, has a charming orchestral accompaniment that is developed out of a first motive of a melody. The sinfonia that opens the second part is a fantasia on the same melody. This is the only occasion on which Bach has treated a chorale in purely orchestral style. Of the solos, the most striking is the bass aria, Mein Herze glaubt und liebt, with its wonderful trumpet accompaniment. Another trumpet cantata par excellence is the one performed on the second Sunday after Trinity, Die Himmel erzählen die Ehre Gottes, number 76. No one who has once heard them can forget the marvellous theme to which Bach has set the 2 verses from the Psalms that compose the opening chorus. The movement is one of the most effective of his inventions. It is literally intoxicating. Even if Bach had not noted on the cover of this cantata that he wrote it for the second Sunday after Trinity, 1723, we would be sure that it originated at the same time as the one last mentioned. In its bipartite form, in the symphonic introduction to the seconda parte, In the instrumental accompaniment to the chorale, in the use of the same melody to end the first and second part, in the character of the solos, it is plainly the twin sister of the other. The falling bass figure in the accompaniment to the chorale, Es woll uns Gott gnädig sein, is motived by the conclusion of the previous arioso, Drum sei dir dies Gebet demütig zugeschickt, be this prayer most humbly offered to thee. We can see a crowd of people kneeling and bowing their heads. In the tenor aria, the haughty and defiant motive symbolizes the words Hasse nur, hasse mich recht, feindliches Geschlecht, hate me well, O my enemies. In the middle section, where mention is made of embracing Jesus by faith, the nestling melodic line of a voice suggests the persecuted soul seeking refuge in its Redeemer. The aria Hört ihr Völker Gottes Stimme, in which the soprano voice addresses its alluring cry to all the world, is generally taken so slowly that the brightness and charm of it are lost. In the arioso-like recitative, So lässt sich Gott nicht unbezeugt, the orchestra depicts most expressively the words, The heavens are stirred and the soul and body are moved. In these first months in Leipzig, Bach did not keep to the same poet. He did not collaborate with Picander until 1724. We can rarely discover the names of his previous librettists. Sometimes he harked back to Franck and Neumeister. From the latter he took the text of the cantata Ein ungefärbt Gemüte, No. 24, which he produced on the fourth Sunday after Trinity. This also ends with a chorale with a bewitching orchestral accompaniment. In the chorus, Alles nun, das ihr wollet, das euch die Menschen tun, Christ's words are given out rather too disconnectedly. At the commencement, alles is repeated 4 times and alles nun twice. The allegro before the fugato breaks off with the words Alles nun, das ihr wollet. It was fortunate that Mattheson did not see this cantata. The declamation is more expressive in the opening chorus of a cantata for the 7th Sunday after Trinity, Ärgere dich, o Seele nicht, No. 186, text by Franck, the cover of which bears the date 1723. Here the final chorale of the first part, with its orchestral accompaniment, almost becomes a chorale fantasia. It was probably repeated after the second part. In the tenor aria, Mein Heiland lässt sich merken in seinen Gnaden werken, the oboe gives out the joy motive. In the soprano aria, Die Armen will der Herr umarmen, the bass and the violin figures that twine round the melody are of transcendent tenderness, and the final duet in gig form, Lass, Seele, kein Leiden von Jesu dich scheiden, for soprano and alto, exhales a Dionysiac joy. The score is one of the most perfect of Bach's clean copies. Perhaps it represents a drastic revision and expansion of a Weimar cantata. The happy improvements made in Franck's text may be the work of Bach's librettist of that time. On the other hand, the score of a solo cantata for the 13th Sunday after Trinity, Ihr die ihr euch von Christo nennet, No. 164, has been so hastily written that it is hardly decipherable. Bach has tried his best to compose warm music to Franck's remarkably dry effusions on the subject of Christian love. In the final duet, Händen, die sich nicht verschließen, wird der Himmel aufgetan, to hands that are not closed will heaven be opened, he cannot refrain from representing in his music the antithetical motions described in the words. The unison theme of the flutes, oboes, and violins is given out in inversion by the orchestral basses. For the first Sunday in Advent he probably performed one of his Weimar cantatas, and, as in the Leipzig churches there was no music given on the following Sundays, he had ample time to prepare for the 3 Christmas feast days. On the first of these he produced Christen etzet diesen Tag, No. 63, a noble and animated piece of festival music. In the opening and final chorus the orchestra includes, besides the strings, 4 trumpets, 3 oboes and bassoon, and of course kettle drums. In the first chorus a charming effect is made at the words Kommt und eilt mit mir zur Krippen, hasten with me to the manger, the soprano always being 3 beats ahead of the other voices. In the final chorus we have the chromatic grief motive at the words Das uns Satan möge quälen, that Satan may torment us. Anyone who thinks that Bach cannot write in an agreeable popular style should read the duet ruft und fleht den Himmel an, kommt ihr Christen, kommt zum Reihen. In the cantata for the second day, Dazu ist erschienen der Sohn Gottes, number 40, the music is of a characteristic order. In the first chorus, the words, dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre, that he may destroy the works of the devil, are always scanned thus, giving the effect of something monstrous and horrid. In the bass aria, höllische Schlange, wird dir nicht bange, der dir den Kopf als ein Sieger zerknickt, ist nun geboren. Hellish serpent, are you not in fear? He who shall bruise thy head is now born. The first violins have a twisting serpent motif, while the rhythm of in the remainder of the orchestra represents the heavy trampling of a conqueror. At the words, der dir den Kopf als ein Sieger zerknickt, the serpent theme descends to the bass. The recitative, die Schlange so im Paradies, the serpent as in paradise, is accompanied by rocking figures suggestive of a seductive reptile swaying to and fro on the tree before the eyes of Eve. It is inconceivable how Zelter could arrange the first chorus to the words, Ihr seid Gottes Kinder und wisset es nicht. Ye are God's children, but know it not. We cannot blame him very severely, however, for Bach himself treated this chorus badly, using it for the Cum Sancto Spiritu in the F major Mass. The cantata Sehet, welch eine Liebe hat uns der Vater erzeiget, number 64, was probably intended for the third day of Christmas. The first chorus consists of a splendid strict fugue, the instruments not having an independent part but merely reinforcing the voices. It is like an idealized old motet, and makes us regret that Bach did not write more choruses of this kind. The recitative Geh Welt, Go World, is accompanied by the hastening motive in the bass. From this there afterwards grows the motive with which the violin in the aria Was die Welt in sich hält, what the world contains, suggests that the things of this world are equally transitory. Only two soloists, soprano and alto, are needed in the cantata if a short and unessential bass recitative be sacrificed. The three chorales are extraordinarily impressive. Thus, from May to December 1723, Bach wrote at least 8 cantatas. For the other Sundays he made use either of his Weimar cantatas or of the works of other composers. Though he could not have adopted the latter procedure often in the early part of his Leipzig period, since every cantor made it a point of honour to produce as much church music as possible, Bach probably gave few of Kuhnau's cantatas, the airs of a former cantor having left the shelves at St. Thomas's as empty as Bach's own airs were to do at his death. The cantata Singet dem Herrn ein neues Lied, number 190, probably written for the new year 1724, is unfortunately in such an imperfect state that no performance of it is possible. Of the first chorus we have only the parts for the voices and the first and second violins. The parts of a cantata were probably separated, owing to Bach having reset the music to the text, Lobet Zion deinen Gott, for the Jubilee celebration of the delivery of the Augsburg Confession on 25th June 1730. The portions we have are merely those not used for this purpose. The solemn final chorale, however, is complete, and is admirably suited, even as regards the text, to musical festivities at the New Year. The text of a cantata is perhaps by Picander, for we find the new version of 1730 in his works. End of chapter 25, part 1.